Welcome to this explainer. Okay, right off the bat, I want you to picture your own bathroom for a second. Somewhere in a drawer or maybe tucked away in a cabinet, there's probably a box of tampons, pads, or a menstrual cup. You'd likely bought it at a store, brought it home, and honestly didn't think twice about it. It's just kind of there, right? In the modern world, it exists in the exact same everyday way that toilet paper does. But what if I told you that for 99.9% of human history, literally none of that existed? No pads, no tampons, and absolutely no pharmacy on the corner. For over 300,000 years, every woman who ever lived dealt with the exact same biological reality using nothing but whatever she could pull from the ground beneath her feet. Today, we're going to explore a massive historical shift. The answer to how our ancestors actually lived completely reshapes everything we assume about the female body, about ancient culture, and about a biological cycle that, shockingly, most of human history barely even experienced.
So, let's dive right into this pretty jarring reality. What if human biology was never designed for a monthly period? It's the part almost nobody expects when they think about the ancient world. For over 300,000 years, your ancient ancestors almost never had periods. Just think about that for a second. Today, we treat the monthly cycle as this inescapable, foundational absolute of human biology. But what if the way we experience it right now is entirely new?
Look at the sheer difference here. A modern woman living in an industrialized country is going to menstruate roughly 450 times in her lifetime. That equates to about 40 years of relentless monthly cycles, from around age 12 all the way to menopause. But history paints a completely different picture. Anthropologist Beverly Strassman actually conducted this fascinating study of the Dogon people of Mali. They're one of the last populations on Earth still living without modern contraception. And she found that Dogon women menstruated roughly 100 times in their entire lives. Other researchers looking at hunter-gatherer populations have put that number even lower, down to just 50. That is not a typo. 50 periods in an entire lifetime, compared to 450 today. The difference is absolutely staggering, and understanding why explains almost everything about how ancient women actually lived.
So how on earth was the ancient number so incredibly low? Well, let's trace a typical ancient reproductive timeline. First off, ancient girls simply did not get their periods when modern girls do. Today, the average age for a first period is about 12, but in hunter-gatherer societies, that number was closer to 16 or 17. Why? It all comes down to body fat. The human reproductive system is kind of like a strict accountant. It requires a very specific threshold of energy reserves before it'll even switch on. And ancient girls were incredibly lean. They walked miles every single day foraging, and their bodies just didn't possess the caloric surplus needed to trigger menstruation that early. So they started much later. Then, without contraception, they typically became pregnant within a year or two. That means 9 solid months of pregnancy with no cycle at all. And after that came a very specific, intense type of breastfeeding.
And this brings us to a really fascinating biological mechanism called lactational amenorrhea. It's a big term, but here's what it means. If we look at hunter-gatherer populations like the Kungsan of the Kalahari Desert, mothers didn't just breastfeed, they breastfed on demand, sometimes dozens of times a day for 3 to 4 years straight. This constant, intense nursing triggers high levels of a hormone called prolactin, and prolactin acts as a massive biological stop sign. It suppresses ovulation entirely. No ovulation means no period. So you'd have a first period at 17, a pregnancy, 3 to 4 years of nursing with 0 cycles, maybe a brief return of a cycle, and then boom, another pregnancy. This pattern repeated over and over again. A whole decade could literally pass between periods.
Now, those 50 or so cycles in a lifetime did eventually happen, right? And obviously, there was no drugstore waiting for them. So what did they actually use? The straightforward answer is whatever the land provided. Sphagnum moss was incredibly common across various climates because it's naturally super absorbent. It can actually hold up to 20 times its own weight in liquid. Women would pack it between their legs or wrap it in soft animal skins. In drier regions, dried grass or bark fibers did the trick. But here is what's truly fascinating. Many groups used absolutely nothing. Ethnographic accounts reveal that women in many indigenous communities simply wore dark wraps or just allowed the blood to flow freely while going about their day. There was zero cultural expectation or pressure to capture and frantically hide the blood. For most of human history, it was just blood.
Part 1. Places of Spiritual Power. Reframing the Menstrual Lodge.
Okay, we really need to flip our modern assumptions upside down here regarding what happened when women did menstruate in the ancient world. You've probably heard the term menstrual huts and instantly pictured something deeply oppressive. But the crucial point is right here. Seclusion was not exile. It was concentration. In dozens of cultures across every inhabited continent, menstruating women voluntarily separated themselves and went to specific places, often called menstrual lodges. The modern cynical assumption is that this was some sort of punishment, that women were banished because they were deemed unclean or physically dangerous to the men. But if we actually look closely at the anthropological record, it tells a remarkably different, empowering story.
Take the Yurok people of Northern California as a perfect example of this. In their culture, a menstruating woman wasn't seen as contaminated at all. Rather, she was considered to be at the absolute height of her spiritual power. She was removed from her daily chores and tasks precisely because her energy was viewed as being far too intense for ordinary, mundane life. She wasn't being cast out, she was being revered.
And we see this echoed all across the world. For the Kalasha people of Pakistan, their communal menstrual house, which they called the Bashali, functioned less like a prison and much more like a restful retreat. Women gathered there together. They told stories, they shared food, they laughed, and most importantly, they rested, while the men and children were left to manage the demanding household chores without them. For women who spent literally every other day of the month working relentlessly from dawn to dark, the Bashali was quite literally the only break that biology had built into their hard working lives.
Part 2. Red Ochre and Symbolism, the first human canvas.
Now this brings us to an incredible archaeological mystery stretching back over 100,000 years. Archaeologists keep finding powdered red ochre just everywhere across early African sites, smeared on skin, mixed with animal fat, applied to tools, to bones, and to cave walls. This mystery is explained by something called the Female Cosmetic Coalition's hypothesis. It's a theory formulated by anthropologists Camilla Power and Chris Knight, and argues that early human women used this red ochre to deliberately simulate menstrual blood on their own bodies. See, as humans evolved, women lost the visible physical signs of ovulation that a lot of other primates display. Menstruation, therefore, became the absolute most obvious marker of reproductive status. Power and Knight argued that early women began painting their skin with red ochre as a powerful collective social signal. It was a way for women to band together, amplify, and actively control what that blood meant to the males in the group.
Just think about the weight of this for a moment. If this anthropological theory holds true, then the very first symbolic act in all of human history, the first time any human being ever decorated a physical body with pigment to convey a social meaning, was not just some random abstract art for art's sake, it was blood. Or at the very least, it was meant to look exactly like it. The very foundation of human culture, of symbolic art and collective signaling, was directly born from the celebration and the visual broadcast of menstruation.
Part 3. The modern mismatch. From 300,000 years to a single century.
So how did we lose all this? Well, fast forward to World War I. French nurses on the brutal front lines realized that highly absorbent cellulose wound bandages absorbed blood far better than traditional cloth. And boom, this led to the invention of Kotex in 1920. In a single generation, our ancestral management of menstruation was permanently replaced by an industrial product. But this rapid shift had some profound physical consequences. We completely changed 300,000 years of biology, leading to what evolutionary biologists call an evolutionary mismatch. Remember, your body was built for maybe 50 cycles. Today, it experiences 450. Modern women now experience continuous monthly ovulation. And every single time ovulation happens, it triggers rapid cell division in the ovaries. Every single division is a microscopic chance for cellular mutation. And more mutations ultimately mean a dramatically higher risk of ovarian and endometrial cancers, conditions that were virtually non-existent in our ancestral populations.
And that leads to this wildly counterintuitive medical reality. Surprisingly, the hormonal birth control pill actually lowers these specific cancer risks. Why? Not because it's actively treating a disease, but because it aggressively suppresses ovulation. By stopping that monthly cycle, the pill accidentally mimics the rare period biology and those long stretches of lactational amenorrhea that our bodies originally evolved and were perfectly designed to handle.
So, to wrap up this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves this fundamental question. Look at the journey we've just taken. We went from ancient women treating their biology as a deep source of spiritual power, resting in community lodges, and using red ochre to create the very first symbols of human culture, to today. Today, we buy plastic-wrapped products without speaking, we hide them in our sleeves on the way to the office bathroom, and we act as if the most ancient and universal process in the female body is something that inherently needs to be ashamed of and hidden away. Your ancestors didn't hide it because they didn't have a reason to. So what exactly did we lose when we decided our own biology